Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So today I'm going to try to do something called DigiTopics, where I basically just talk about a mechanic or aspect of the Digimon game that I currently find interesting or enjoying. Today I'm going to be talking about when played. So obviously when played is different than when digivolved, but they are both similar in the fact that they are both essentially enter the battlefield effects. So when digivolved is when you digivolve into this Digimon, you will get that when digivolved effect. When played is when you just play it for its initial cost and it goes directly onto the battlefield, then you'll get that effect. But the interesting thing about when played is the fact that these are more or less option cards on legs. And what I mean by that is option cards are generally one-time use effects, and they are color locked to you needing another card of the same color on the field. And what's interesting about these Digimon, because they have the when played effect and how the resource system of the game works, you don't necessarily need to have any prerequisites to play the card, you just play the card. Which definitely can create some interesting tech and some interesting support cards, because now that you have a, let's say, blue card on the field in your, let's say, red deck, well, now you could start using some blue option cards. So they definitely provide a lot of extra depth in terms of deck building and to the game as a whole. So the first example that I have here is Gabumon. He just has the basic ability of, when played, draw a card. So virtually every single deck in the entire game can use this card and use this effect, because the when played goes off of the cost and not off of the evolution. So if you find yourself lacking card draw in a deck, you could just splash in this Gabumon just to get an extra card draw. And it is a card on the board, even though its stats are a little on the weaker side. It doesn't necessarily matter, because you just care about getting the when played effect off. And the fact that you'll have a body on board is just the extra benefit. So Palmon follows this similar pattern where you just really want the when played effect, and it doesn't really want you to digivolve on top of this Digimon or digivolve into this Digimon, because if you digivolve into it, you won't get the when played effect, and if you digivolve on top of it, well, it doesn't have any inheritable effects, so it's not really that worthwhile for you digivolving on top of it. Agumon is another great example of this for red, and Patamon is another great example of this for yellow. Champions are looking to follow this same type of pattern, where they're basically just option cards on legs, where you really don't want to digivolve into it because there's no inherent benefit on doing so, and you don't want to digivolve off of him because, again, he doesn't give any inheritable effects, so there's no real incentive to do so unless you absolutely have to. But if this card is going as a tech in an off color, then, like I said, all you really care about is the when played effect, and usually the when played effect is going to be powerful enough to offset the stats of the card and the cost of the card. Devimon is a great example of this in purple, and Angemon is a great example of this in yellow. Ultimates will also follow the same pattern as we've seen before. So Chimeramon is a great example of this in purple, and Skullgreymon is a great example of this in red. Now, there are some Digimon with inheritable abilities that also have when played, and for the most part, they are what you want to start your Digivolution chain with because of the when played effect. So there's, again, not really a benefit to digivolving into this Digimon because you won't get the when played effect, and the inheritable ability incentivizes you to play one level up from this Digimon. And Zudomon is also a great example of this in blue. Now, as far as Megas go, well, Megas, for the most part, you don't really digivolve on top of. There are a couple examples where you can, but Megas, you just want to play it for its when played, and there's no real incentive for you trying to digivolve all the way up into this, because then you don't get the when played effect. Usually they'll have some sort of other effect that will incentivize you in case you have to play it off of evolving it, but for the most part, the when played effect is the only thing that matters. And Megas definitely follow the same pattern, it's just their effects are going to be the strongest compared to all of the others. So Volcanic Dramon is another great example of a Mega you just want to play and not try to Digivolve up into. And then that leads us to some of the cards that don't exactly have when played effects, but are still great support cards to think about because they are just generically good enough to just run. So there are certain Tamers that you don't necessarily need to do anything with, but just to play the Tamer, and then these Tamer cards will also help unlock the option cards. And the Tamer cards will also stay on the board because currently there's no way of interacting with Tamer cards. So there's just a couple of different generically decent enough Tamer cards where you could run it in virtually any deck. And then this isn't exactly a when played effect, but it is working in a similar way where you just care about playing the card as is. So Black War Greymon is a great example of a Digimon where it can be splashed into virtually any deck because of how the card functions. If your opponent basically has a Mega on board, then this card from your hand costs 6 less to play. So basically it is a 7-cost Mega that virtually any deck can run, and it's just a pretty solid Tekken support card. And then Black do have some really solid blockers, where you could just splash in Gatsumon as just a generic blocker to play that's really cheap and efficient. And Gardramon is also a similar card where you don't really care about anything else other than just playing the card as a blocker. Playing cards versus digivolving is definitely an interesting dynamic that I am looking forward to see them expand upon, because a lot of these when played cards are more or less option cards that can go into virtually any deck and don't really have any kind of restriction, and they could also allow you to add in some extra support cards that are off color that you might not have thought about running otherwise. So that's kind of all I have for this video. Feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.